Welcome back to another edition of This Week in Israel, where we discuss all the hot topics happening in Israel that you should care about and as they pertain to Israel on the world stage. So we'll start domestically as Israelis are continuing to protest after part of the judicial reform legislation that has been proposed by the Bibi Netanyahu government was passed. The reasonableness clause that allows the court to strike down legislation that is passed by the Knesset, by the parliament, based on the grounds that it is unreasonable, passed the Knesset last week. So Israelis are coming out to the streets to protest both in favor and against the reform, as they have been doing for the past 30 weeks. So I'm certain that will continue as this government continues to implement and pass judicial reform legislation. Okay. On the international stage, hopes for a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia have been reinvigorated as both the prime minister and the foreign minister have put out statements that that normalization with Saudi Arabia could take place as early as March next year. Saudi Arabia, which is the leader of the Sunni bloc of nations within the Gulf, would be a major win for peace in the region, for trade, and for the ability for Saudi Arabia to work with Israel on medical advancements, on defense advancements, certainly as we share so many common threats. And that would also allow them to buy more weapons from defense weaponry from Israel and work closer with the United States. So all eyes are on Saudi Arabia right now. The Palestinian Authority has urged Saudi Arabia to not normalize with Israel until they withdraw to pre-1967 borders, and which is something Israel is not prepared to do. So we'll see how that goes. The Palestinian Authority has put out statements saying that the Saudi Arabia, by normalizing relations with Israel, Saudi Arabia would be foregoing the Palestinian plight and give up on the Palestinians entirely. On that note, earlier this week, a U.S. Delegation led by Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israeli-Palestinian Affairs, Andrew Miller, had a delegation meeting in Ramallah with the PLO Executive Committee Secretary General Hussein al-Sheikh and other Palestinian Authority officials like Riyad al-Malki, who is their foreign minister. The meeting ended up bearing no fruit and was called both weak and unproductive afterwards. And in the statement the Palestinian Authority put out after the meeting, they found that this particular administration led by President Biden is carrying over many of the very pro-Israel policies and that of the previous administration, namely the Trump administration. And they have found that that Israel is not being pressured enough by the United States when it comes to their building of settlements in disputed territory and military incursions, as they put it, into Palestinian-controlled territory like Jenin. So unfortunately, yet another meeting that has produced no fruit, and we are not closer to peace. But it is clear that the Palestinian Authority called out the United States for being too pro-Israel and called out Saudi Arabia for giving up on the Palestinians. On the northern border, Hezbollah, which is a military organization and an anti-Israel organization that runs the country of Lebanon, has amassed and mobilized thousands of troops to the northern border, which prompted a visit from the Israeli Secretary General of the Army, who did a thorough search of the border, got a full briefing, and inspected the new construction of an anti-infiltration border that is to protection on the northern border that will be going into effect rather soon. So with that barrier, hopefully we'll be safe. And only good news, God willing, it should be a peaceful week in Israel. And I can't wait to see you next week.